I am 93 years old, and I learned that my marriage began with a lie. Not a small lie, not the kind people tell to keep the peace. The kind of lie that stretches across 70 years of your life and makes you wonder which memories were real and which ones were just shadows. My name is Ben. I've lived a long life, longer than most men I grew up with. I was born in 1932 in a small town in Ohio. Back then, life moved slower. People stayed where they were born. They married young. They worked hard, raised families, and hoped for quiet evenings on the porch when they got old. I thought I had that life. I married my wife, Margaret, when I was 22 years old. She was 21. I still remember the day we met at a church picnic in the summer of 1953. She had dark hair, bright eyes, and a laugh that carried across the field like music. When she smiled at me, I felt like the luckiest man in the world. We got married the following spring. Our wedding wasn't fancy, just a small white church, folding chairs, and a cake her mother baked in their kitchen. I remember the way Margaret looked walking down the aisle. The sunlight from the stained glass windows fell across her dress. I remember thinking, this is the beginning of my life. For 70 years, I believed that moment was the start of something honest. Turns out, it might have been the beginning of a secret instead. Margaret passed away 3 years ago, 90 years old, peaceful in her sleep. After a long life filled with grandchildren, Sunday dinners, and quiet mornings with coffee at the kitchen table, I thought grief was the hardest thing an old man could face. I was wrong. The truth came to me in the most ordinary way. I was cleaning out the attic. You reach a certain age, and you start putting your affairs in order. Old boxes, photo albums, letters tied with string, things you haven't looked at in decades. I found a wooden box I didn't recognize. Inside were letters, dozens of them. They were old, yellowed paper, faded ink, the kind people used before phones replaced everything. At first, I thought they were from family, maybe from Margaret's cousins or friends. But when I opened the first one, I saw the name at the bottom. Yours always, Thomas. I didn't know any Thomas, not in our family, not among our friends. But the letter wasn't written to someone named Margaret. It was written to Maggie. That's what he called her. And the words on that page, they didn't sound like friendship. They sounded like love. The date at the top of the letter stopped my heart for a moment. April 12th, 1955. I remember sitting there in the dust of the attic, holding that paper with hands that suddenly felt very old. At first, I thought there had to be some mistake. Maybe it was written before we got married. Maybe it was someone she dated long ago. But then I opened the second letter, then the third. They stretched across years, not months. Years. Some of them talked about places they met, quiet motels outside town, afternoons when I was working late at the factory, times when I was away visiting my parents. And the strange thing was, some of those dates stirred memories in me, little moments I had forgotten about, or maybe moments I had chosen not to question. I remembered nights when Margaret said she was visiting her sister. I remembered weekends when she seemed distant, quiet, like part of her mind was somewhere else. Back then, I never doubted her. Not once. That's how people were raised in my generation. When you married someone, you trusted them. You built a life together brick by brick. You didn't go looking for cracks in the walls. But now, sitting in that attic with those letters spread around me, the cracks started to show. I kept reading, Thomas wrote about how much he loved her, how hard it was watching her live a life with another man. That man was me. In one letter, he wrote something that I can still hear in my head. He said, "I know you had to marry him. It was the only way. But we'll always have what's real between us." I must have read that line 20 times. Had to marry me? What did that mean? Was I just the safe choice? The stable life? The man who could give her a house, children, and security, while her heart belonged to someone else? The more I thought about it, the more memories started shifting in my mind. Margaret was always a good wife, kind, gentle. She took care of our home. She raised our 2 daughters with patience and warmth. She laughed at my jokes. She held my hand at night when storms rattled the windows. There were thousands of moments that felt real. But now I wondered, were they, or was she simply very good at playing the part? That thought hurt more than the letters. I never confronted her. Of course not. She was gone by the time I found them. So the questions stayed trapped in my head. Sometimes I try to imagine what I would have said if she were still here. Would I have been angry? Maybe when I was younger. But at 93, anger doesn't burn the way it used to. What I felt instead was something heavier. Confusion, sadness, and a strange kind of quiet grief for the young man I used to be, the 22-year-old who stood in that church believing he had just married the love of his life. I think about him sometimes. He had his whole future ahead of him. He didn't know that somewhere out there was another man writing letters to his wife, a man who believed he was the one she truly loved. But here's the part that keeps me awake some nights, even knowing all of this. I still remember Margaret, the way she looked on our front porch in the evenings, her gray hair catching the sunset, her hand resting on mine. And in those moments she seemed peaceful, content. If our marriage was a lie, it was a very quiet one, because we built a life together. We raised children who loved us. We celebrated anniversaries, birthdays, Christmas mornings with wrapping paper all over the floor. 70 years of shared time. And time has a way of becoming its own truth. Maybe she loved him once. Maybe she loved him the whole time. Or maybe love is more complicated than the stories we tell about it. I'll never know. The letters are back in that wooden box now. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. They're part of the story, whether I like it or not. At my age, you spend a lot of time thinking about what a life really means. Is it the truth behind the memories, or the memories themselves? If Margaret stood in front of me today and told me everything, I'm not sure what I would do. Maybe I'd ask her why. Maybe I'd ask if she was ever truly happy. Or maybe I'd just sit beside her like we used to and listen to the sound of the wind moving through the trees. Because after 70 years together, even a lie can start to feel like home. And when you're 93 years old, sometimes the truth arrives too late to change the life you've already lived.